All right, let's get to the SEC, which is, of course, by far the best quarterback conference in America on February. In February, as we get started here. And again, this is all just projections. 8 of the 16 will be transfer quarterbacks. You're going to have transfers at Auburn, Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, at Mississippi State, at Arkansas, at Florida, at Ole Miss. And technically, Quinn Ewers counts as a transfer, even though I don't really count him as a transfer because had the rules in NIL been different in the state of Texas, he would have signed out of high school to go to Texas. He was always going to go to Texas. So there you have it. The interesting thing here is not only do you have the best quarterbacks, and I think it's not all that difficult to rank the top 5, 6, or 7, but you also have a group of established starters at teams that are trying to win championships. So on the best teams, and you have quarterbacks that are about to break out at other teams that could be competing for playoff spots. So if you look at the best 7, 8, 9, 10 quarterbacks in this conference, all of whom are probably top 25 nationally, if not top 20 nationally, all of them are on teams that could challenge for playoff spots. In this, with the exception of Graham Mertz.
Yeah, no, I think that's the intrigue.
Sorry,
from yeah, I mean the intrigue for me is if you start making a list of all America quarterbacks, and you look at the SEC, Beck, Milroe, Ewers, Dart, Nico at Tennessee, Brady, Cook. And then you have to think that guys like Nussmeier and Connor Weigman are breakout candidates for this year. It is an incredibly deep group of quarterbacks, and you throw in Jaxson Arnold too. And then just the bottom of the league too. I mean, with all the transfers, and then those transfers are being counted on as guys to be saviors for the program, potentially like Sam Pittman bringing in Taylor Green, coach on the hot seat. You've got Vandegrift at Kentucky. There is no one else, basically on Kentucky's depth chart, proven, and that's why they brought Vandegrift in. So just a very talented, top-heavy group of quarterbacks. But there's also intrigue at some of the other spots here too. You mentioned Mertz, DJ Lagway coming in as well. So how does that situation play out for Florida this year too? Is going to be really interesting.
I have a feeling that's an Anthony Richardson situation as well, where you're going to see Lagway plenty, but Mertz is just clearly a more efficient player that executes the offense, I think, at a pretty high level. I mean, at one point, this guy was over 80% passing last year. So I think he belongs in this conversation, but I do not think Florida is the team that is competing for a playoff spot. But otherwise, I think all of these other teams, there's 7 or 8 teams that could be competing for playoff spots, in part because they either have an established star at quarterback or a guy that we think is going to break out. And I think there's pretty clear tiers. I think the top 5 are names that are established, that have won, I think, literally 10 games, all of them, as a starter in the conference, which is impressive. And then you have this group of 3 or 4 names that are really, really talented that are going to break out. And I just don't think you can put them at the into that top tier. Now, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, Quinn Ewers, Brady Cook, Jaxson Dart. Those 5 are atop the conference. What order and how do we evaluate these guys?
I actually have a different number 5 than you do, but I'll start at the top. I've got Carson Beck at 1. I think just his production as a first-year starter, also the in-season growth. Like, it felt like that second half against Auburn is when he grew up, and as a result, Georgia got a lot more confident in him the rest of the way. He actually led the SEC in passing yards. I know Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy, but Carson Beck led the conference in passing yards, and obviously Daniels was much more dynamic. But I think with Georgia having more kind of high-profile spotlight games this year with Clemson, with Texas, with Alabama, there'll be opportunities for him to sort of earn that first-team All-America spot. So I've got him at 1. I've got Milroe at 2. I am fascinated by the Kalen DeBoer Milroe marriage and how they mesh those two things together, because Milroe is incredibly dynamic. We saw the ability to hit the big plays last year, but that middle sort of intermediate 10 to 19 range is going to be where we're going to need to see some growth this year. Curious to see what DeBoer does. And then Ewers, the growth from year 1 to year 2, it was there. He needs to take another step forward this year for Texas to win it all. And same thing too for Jaxson Dart. He got better year 1, year 2 as the starter. No Quinshad Judkins, but I think if you're Ole Miss, obviously you're going to miss Quinshad Judkins, but Dart is more than capable of handling more than he did last season. And you look at some of the weapons too. I feel very good about Jaxson Dart as a top 5 quarterback nationally for this season.
All right. So we'll start the Brady Cook slander conversation right now, because you're obviously slandering Brady Cook. So I had the top 2, Carson Beck and Jalen Milroe, as the debate. Jalen Milroe finished 6th in the Heisman voting last year. I had him on my top 3 in my ballot. I think there's a great discussion about his fit in the Kalen DeBoer offense. I think the things he's going to need to do better are quick release, get rid of the football quickly, short passing game. But the way those questions are asked, it's almost as if we don't ask the same question about the fit in the Tommy Rees offense, which I also don't think maximized his abilities until the end of the season when they finally turned him loose. I think Kalen DeBoer is going to be far more likely to turn him loose on the ground. I think if you look at Michael Penix, almost half of his throws last year were in the first 5 to 7 yards around the line of scrimmage. The Washington offense also has an element of the short, quick passing game. I think that's the part you want to see from Milroe. There's a part of me that thinks Jalen Milroe might be the best, most talented, most dynamic quarterback in the entire country. That's what led him to an SEC championship. That's what led him to, whatever it was, 180 yards and 4 touchdowns against LSU. Like this, how he beat Georgia in the SEC championship game was his legs in very critical situations and the short passing game in those drives against Georgia in the fourth quarter. And while Beck was also brilliant in those situations, Beck feels like the safe pick. And so I'll go with Carson Beck at number 1, the way Dylan Gabriel is the safe pick in the Big Ten and Cam Ward is the safe pick in the ACC as the number 1 player. I think Beck is the safe pick. Georgia is going to provide him an environment of success. There's more questions about Milroe, so that's why he's at 2. I think Dart and Cook are almost identical. Like everything about their game is similar. The offenses are similar. I think Missouri has a better supporting cast, although both of them have an elite receiver. Like there are 10-win teams that normally don't win 10 games. They're coming back. I think Brady Cook is underrated in all of this. And I put Quinn Ewers at 3 because I think he's in between. I don't think he's the best of the best, but I think he's slightly better than Cook and Dart. I have Cook at 4, Dart at 5. I know who you have ahead of Brady Cook, and I have him at 6, but we'll get to him in a second. But I just think you look at Brady Cook to me is the mobility, the running, the accuracy, the growth, the development, 10 wins. I don't know. I think Cook is slightly better than Jaxson Dart, but that's just me.
It's hard to doubt Brady Cook because of the season that he had last year, where basically, to quote Geno Smith, like everybody wrote him off and he didn't write back. I mean, because he was booed by his own fans, and he comes out and then, he was the shoulder injury, I think, going back to 2022, played a big kind of part in his sort of up and down season. Then he gets his shoulder repaired. He has a much better season, a much better offensive coordinator scheme, however you want to put it. It's hard to doubt him because I think with the supporting cast that they have some holes to fill in the offensive line. But second year under Kirby Moore and Eli Drinkowitz as the full-time starter, I mean, I've got him top, 15 nationally.
You've got him behind Nico is what you've got.
But I have him behind Nico, and it is a projection. I just think that, when you look at the Heupel offense last year at Tennessee, I think that's probably the worst production that Tennessee's going to have on offense under Heupel. And to me, Nico is it's a lot of upside. It's a lot of projection at this point, but you can see in the bowl game the talent, not to mention being able to score touchdowns in the red zone on the ground, sort of helping Tennessee get into the end zone after maybe falling a little short at times before. I just think the complete package of talent, offensive scheme, the production, it's all going to be there. So I've got him at 5, but if you wanted to go, I mean, and again, these are 5 and 6. They're back to back in my national rankings. This is, again, it's a deep year for quarterbacks. I'm just going upside with Nico here at 5.
Yeah, we'll get to our national rankings in a second, but I've got Brady Cook 9, Jaxson Dart 10, Nico at 11 nationally.
It's pretty.
Those are my rankings. But basically top 10 quarterbacks. So I do think Nico is clearly the top of this breakout group, which of course in my mind would be Garrett Nussmeier, LSU, Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma, and Connor Weigman at Texas A&M. Graham Mertz is in there somewhere, depending on how much you appreciate his efficiency. But Nico to me he's the Miller Moss of the SEC, who of course is going to have huge numbers at USC. I think Nico is the guy who's even more talented and in a system that is going to help him. The offensive line should be good. Brew McCoy's coming back. Like, Dylan Sampson's a really good player. Like that. I agree. Nico has a chance to be like number 1 or 2 or 3 on this list at the end of the season. I just don't think you can put like Dart has won 10 games at Ole Miss and at a New Year's Six game. Brady Cook has won 10 games at Missouri, and they beat the tar out of Tennessee last year. I mean, Ewers won a conference championship and was in the playoff. Milroe almost won a Heisman and an SEC champ, and of course, Georgia's Georgia. I just don't think you can like. I understand why you could put Nico at 2 or 3 or 4 on this list, and he could finish there. I just think you kind of have to like, okay, you've never really started a regular season football game. Like
You're not wrong. I'm just
that's,
banking on projection and upside.
I
I'll
agree.
say,
I agree.
I think on your point, when you look at kind of the middle of the league here, to me, like Nussmeier, Weigman, Arnold are a step ahead of that next tier, and Mertz just kind of fits in there. I had him at 10th in the conference. I like the efficiency. I like the sort of breakout season that he had. I'd love to see a little bit more of them stretching the field this year. He just kind of fit in nicely behind the breakout candidates. And you get to that next tier of quarterbacks like Peyton Thorne, Blake Shapen, Diego Pavia. Like, don't know what to do with some of those guys at the back half, but it felt like Mertz just kind of fit nice at 10, but also you're still looking at him as probably top 25 to 30 in the country just based upon the season that he had last year.
Quarterback rating last year for Graham Mertz ahead of Brady Cook, ahead of Michael Penix, ahead of Jordan Travis, ahead of Shedeur Sanders, ahead of Drake May, ahead of Spencer Rattler, ahead of all these guys in quarterback rating from an efficiency standpoint for Graham Mertz last year. 72.9%, third in the entire college football, better than Carson Beck. Almost 3,000 yards passing, only 3 interceptions. The guy is the offense is not the problem at Florida. It's the defense. That's the problem at Florida. Although they're gonna have to replace without Pearsall and without Etienne, they're gonna have to replace some of those pieces. Although they've got some nice young ones. I don't know what to make the bottom. I don't even want to really get into this. I mean, I think Thorne and Vandegrift have a chance. Diego Pavia, that's a fun name for Vanderbilt fans. He's going to be pretty solid, but I think ultimately this group is almost a reflection of the national list. So if you want to go ahead and tell me, because I think the SEC quarterbacks are clearly the best of these 4 conferences. And I think when you do your top 10 or top 12 or top 20, you're going to have, like you said, 7, 8, 9, 10 SEC guys in there. Because, again, depending on how you feel about Connor Weigman or Graham Mertz or Jaxson Arnold, those guys could be very, very good players this year. So I don't know where you want to start with your All-American list if you want to go ahead and give it away now. Because there's a safe pick, and then there's like a heartstrings pick for me, and then there's like a guy who I think is Michael Vick, but doesn't necessarily fit in there's so much intrigue here. There's no clear number 1 All-American quarterback, in my opinion.
I think this is the pre-spring, preseason list, all subject to change based upon more late night thoughts, statistical analysis, tape watching, whatever you want to call it. I'm going safe at 1 and 2. I'm going Carson Beck and Dillon Gabriel. I just think they're the easy picks at this point.
Okay.
I've got, after that, is sort of a run of SEC quarterbacks. Milroe at 3, Ewers 4, Dart 5, then a run of Big 12 quarterbacks, Jalen Daniels, Noah Fafita, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Rising, then Nico at 10, Brady Cook at 11.
All right. I think you missed a name in there, but we'll get to him in a second. No, I want to put Jalen Daniels at number 1 from Kansas because I think Carson Beck is the better player, probably a better pro athlete, better pro prospect, probably going to be on a better team, putting up better numbers. But I think Jalen Daniels is the most valuable quarterback in all of college football. So I'll be also safe. And I will say first team All-American Carson Beck. I will go Jalen Daniels, number 2 at Kansas. I will go Jalen Milroe, the Alabama quarterback, at number 3. That is my list there. I have a really tough time from here on. I went with Quinn Ewers at number 4, but I could be talked out of that because I don't think he's all that better than Drew Aller or Cam Ward. Dillon Gabriel is at number 5 for me, so I could probably be convinced to put Dillon Gabriel at 4. I have Riley Leonard at Notre Dame in this conversation. I think Riley Leonard, fully healthy, with Mike Denbrock, former LSU coordinator, calling plays from an athletic size, speed, dual threat ability. I think Riley Leonard is a top 8 quarterback in the country. I have Brady Cook at 8, Jaxson Dart at 9, Nico at 10, Drew Aller at 11, Sanders and Fafita at 12 and 13. But really, my All-Americans are Carson Beck 1, Jalen Daniels 2, Jalen Milroe 3, and then I could be convinced to put Dillon Gabriel at 4.
I had Riley Leonard at 13 and by the way, my guy Garrett Green is 12 with Nussmeier. Rest of my top 20, and this is just kind of rough, was Leonard at 13, then Nussmeier, Weigman, Caden Salter, from Liberty, Cam Ward, DJU, Aller, and Will Howard in some
You're
sort
low
of.
on Drew Aller. Okay. I have him much higher on my list than you.
Uh,
So SEC, I've got Carson Beck at 1, SEC. I got Big 12 at 2. I've got Milroe at 3. I've got Ewers at 4, so that's 3 SEC. I've got Dylan Gabriel at 5. Riley Leonard at 6. I have Cam Ward at 7, but that feels off now that I see it written down there.
It's not crazy. It's just it's higher than most.
Brady Cook at 8. Jaxson Dart at 9. Nico at 10. Drew Aller at 11. Shedeur Sanders at 12. Fafita at 13. Cam Rising at 14. McCall 15. And then Will Howard, Avery Johnson, Graham Mertz, Haynes King, Aiden Childs, and then these other guys, Jaxson Arnold, Connor Weigman, Garrett Nussmeier. I don't know which one of those SEC guys is going to be a star with Nico, but one of them is going to be. If not, maybe 2 or 3 of them. So, but man, I've never seen an All-American list that's this hard to figure out. I mean, is Carson Beck the best player in college football, the best quarterback? I don't know. Maybe.
Like I said, I think those games against Texas and Alabama will
Yep.
tell us a lot about him this year. But yeah, I think he proved it last year. I think the numbers are there. I think I hate to, I know people hate the word eye test, but I thought to me, like, it was there. So
No, I agree.
yeah,
I agree.
no concerns for me.
Other than the length of his neck, it's all there. It's all there for Carson Beck. And honestly, like you said, all these guys are going to, like Milroe and Beck are going to play each other. Beck and, Ewers and Beck are going to play each other. You got, Weigman and Cook are going to play each other. Like, you got all kinds of guys in the Big Ten. All the big names are going to play each other. So it should be a ton of fun. That is our All-American quarterback. How about that? No, mostly football talk today on the show.
It was glorious. Thank you.
Otherwise, for Stephen Lassan, I am Braden Gall. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you next week. Thank you, guys. Rate, review, subscribe, and share. Do all that great stuff. Have a great week.